Hello, everybody. I kind of just wanted to do a little impromptu video today, just because I watched the most recent episode of Drag Race Season 14, which was The Roast, where we saw two queens sashay away, Deja Skye and Georges. And now, suddenly, we're at the top 5. We have one episode before the reunion / finale, and I'm just kind of confused with the pacing of the season, because it both felt like we had 1,000 queens for about 1,000 episodes, and now suddenly we're at top 5. And I'm like, how did we get here? Why did parts of the season feel so long, and now we're like rushing to the very end in one episode? So I wanted to kind of solve the mystery, if you will, of maybe what the intention was behind the pacing of the season, maybe some things that went wrong in the original plan, and what they might have done to try and fix those bumps in the road. And honestly, I'm just going to go episode by episode and just try and decipher what was planned from the start and what was kind of thought out in the moment. And we're going to do that by looking at the episodes that required a certain amount of queens. And I haven't really, I decided to not figure the whole thing out before I started the video, because I kind of was looking at it and I'm like, some of this is sus, and it might be more interesting if I kind of talk out these points during the video and kind of solve the mystery as we go along, because some of these things are sus. I don't know if I'm explaining this super well, but let's just start with the very beginning of the season. We have 2 talent shows with 7 queens in each episode, 14 queens this season. Everything's fine. 2 queens go home, only to then immediately be brought back. We're on the same page. Cool. Now we have the ball, which was kind of weird to see right off the bat, especially because it felt like, okay, we're having 2 balls. Each premiere group of queens is going to have a different prompt, but then there's only going to be one winner. I don't know. I kind of thought it would be more fun if there was a winner from each ball, I would say. Like the pair of balls. Each pair had a... That's so stupid. Each pair had a winner, and then each pair had one person in the bottom 2. Because that just makes more sense than, okay, half of you are going to do one prompt, half of you are going to do another prompt, but then there's going to be one winner, and we're just going to pick the bottoms and the lows and the highs with whatever. I think they really easily could have had just a winner from each group, a person who was high in each group, a person who was low in each group, and a person in the bottom from each group, and it would have been really fun to see that. But this one is fine, 14 queens. Moving on, we have the Super Tease, which we're down to 13 queens. We lost June Jambalaya first, and this one, the amount of queens doesn't really matter. I promise you're going to see what I'm meaning when we get to these episodes where no one is going home. Now, we lose both Kornbread and Alyssa Hunter, and this, I think, is the bump in the road that kind of made things a little weird, because you have the Save a Queen episode where it's obviously meant to have 3 groups of 4, but because Kornbread is gone and wasn't really planned to be gone at this point, like its production could not have foreseen that a queen was going to be disqualified because of an injury. So we have 2 groups of 4 and 1 group of 3. But we at least know at this point there are meant to be 12 queens left in the competition. But this challenge didn't matter if we're missing 1. So we go into Glamazon Prime, another challenge that doesn't really matter how many queens are there. There was supposed to be 11, but there are only actually 10. Okay, we skip past all the easy stuff. Now this is where my brain goes a little haywire, because you have 2 challenges which require 9 queens to be there. Daytona Wind has 9 parts to fill, and the girl groups is 3 groups of 3. So that to me is a little sus, because why would you include 2 challenges that you need exactly 9 queens for? And I was thinking, okay, maybe there was like a part in Daytona Wind that they just cut from the script, But I feel like that would be pretty like hard to do, especially if there's like lines with other queens and things that affect the plot. I mean, they maybe could have done this, but I'm going to make the assumption that there were just 9 parts and there was supposed to be 9 queens. Yeah, this is weird. So here are some possible explanations for this. One, the chocolate twist was going to be used in one of these 2 episodes, but depending on who was in the top and the bottom, they just didn't want to use a chocolate bar then, or maybe they still thought it was too early. Because you also have to think, episode 7, we should have 10 queens left, right? If Kornbread wasn't gone, then episode 7 would have 10 queens in the running. So would Daytona Wind or girl groups fit here? No. Maybe they were going to have Snatch Game here and have a 10-person Snatch Game, which they've had the last 2 seasons. That does make sense to me. But then because there were 9 queens left, they're like, okay, we got to put one of these 9 queen challenges in the mix. And to me, this would make sense if, let's say, episode 7 is Snatch Game with 10 queens, and then 1 queen goes home. And I would say after Snatch Game, you're kind of in the latter half of the season, right? Even if it's not by episode count, it feels like Snatch Game is that middle point. And once you get past that, you're in like the end game or close to the end game. So I don't think the chocolate twist was ever going to be used before Snatch Game. Episode 7, Snatch Game with 10 queens. Now you can have Daytona Wind, where you have a bottom 2 and somebody goes home, but it's the chocolate bar twist and they get saved. You have 9 queens then still going into the girl groups challenge where you need 9 parts to fill, and then 1 goes home and you're at 8. And then 8 is the perfect amount of queens for the DragCon challenge. That does make sense, but you also have this Lollapalooza twist, which also needed at least 7 queens to fill. And then the Rusical had 7 parts. See what I mean by how this makes no sense? That would mean that this Lollapalooza twist was always going to happen at 8, so that there would be a winner and then 7 queens in the bottom. And I know that some people do think that maybe this was just a spur of the moment twist, but there's no way that they are going to just randomly pick, 7 songs or 8 songs, however many it was, to lip sync to out of the blue. Just, we'll take the weekend and just, pick out some songs and make this happen. No way. This was 1000% planned from the start, kind of just like the Lollapalooza in All Stars 4. That one was a twist that was thrown to the girls, that was planned from the start. This one, though, is different because they tried to justify it in the edit, right? By saying everybody in Snatch Game is garbage. And for that reason, we are putting you through this twist. Now, whether or not the Snatch Game was as bad as they say they are, I guess we won't know until queens start doing interviews afterwards when their contracts are up and they can start, spilling that tea. But for now, I am just going to personally think that this Lollapalooza was always going to happen at Final 8 so that they could have the 7 bottoms then lip sync in this big twist. You move on from the Lollapalooza to the Rusical, which has 7 parts. And this is why I think they wanted the chocolate bar to maybe happen earlier, because it happens in this episode, and this was the last episode it could happen on, feasibly, because in the remix, we're going to get Catwalk, which I love that song. I'm very excited to see what the queens do with it. It only has a certain amount of room, right? When they do these remixes, they already have the track done, minus the verses that the queens are going to then put over it. So they need to have 5 queens in this remix episode, and 7 in the Rusical, which was 2 episodes prior. So to me, it would make sense that they expected the chocolate twist to happen a little bit earlier, because it kind of forced their hand then to have a double elimination in the roast episode. Here is my final consensus of what I think happened. I think Snatch Game was supposed to happen at Final 10, but Instead, because of Kornbread's elimination, they had to do the final 9 episodes earlier. So they make the Daytona Win Challenge a top 2 instead of a bottom 2, so that way they can go into the next episode, which still requires 9 queens, with all of them still there. So then, got to get rid of somebody in the girl groups. We got rid of Carrie, and then we can go into the DragCon Challenge, which needs 8 queens. And here is where I think that they knew they had to have a double Shantae in this challenge, because we have DragCon, Snatch Game, and Rusical left to do. DragCon needs 8 queens, Rusical needs 7 queens. So Snatch Game is going to have to go somewhere in the middle of that. And they already did the top 2 twist once. Now we can do the bottom 2. We'll save them both. Why don't they use the chocolate bar? I think they were waiting till after Snatch Game, honestly, because, like I said, after Snatch Game, it feels like we're at the end now. And it would be long enough for the twist to be going, because they honestly could have just given either Georges or Jasmine the chocolate bar in this episode, and that would solve the problem of, okay, then we have 8 queens going into Snatch Game, then we can do the Lollapalooza, and then we'll still have enough queens for the Rusical. The problem is, if you're gonna have this chocolate bar twist, it can't be over too soon. And like I said, Snatch Game marks the halfway point in the season, or I guess in this season, the 2/3 point, but I think before the season even started, they set the precedent. We have to wait until after Snatch Game to use the chocolate bar. That's the only thing that makes sense to me of why they didn't just use the chocolate bar here on Georges or Jasmine, because obviously they liked them both enough to keep them another episode. And they also kind of screwed themselves by doing that. Because let's say they use the chocolate bar on Georges in this episode. She loses the lipstick against Jasmine and is saved. So then there's 8 queens still going into the Snatch Game, where they all flop. They do the Lollapalooza. Jasmine goes home. And we're at final 7 with the Rusical. Well, Bosco goes home, right? So Bosco goes home at 7. Then they can have a roast of 6, which is the exact number they had last season for the roast. And one queen goes home. Let's say it's Deja or Georges, whichever one. Now we're at the Rumix, top 5. That feels like a much better paced season, because we're not just having more episodes where no one goes home and then suddenly axing 2 people in one episode just to reach that finish line. So the fact that they didn't makes me think that they were going to wait until after Snatch Game to use the chocolate twist. And then it has more narrative payoff to have the chocolate bar used, because you don't want to use it too early. You don't want it to feel like, oh, okay, well, there was this whole huge big twist and it was used even before Snatch Game. That's done. Now we have a whole season where this twist is not being used. They do this all the time in Survivor with Exile Island and Redemption Island and stuff. If they're gonna introduce this big twist to the season, they want it to have narrative payoff for the majority of the season. They're not gonna want to hype up the season with the twist only for the twist to last half of the season or less than half of the season. It's got to be there for at least 2/3 of it, if not like 3/4 of it, or in Survivor's case with the frickin' Edge of Extinction, till the very last episode. Does this stupid rule of, well, we have to wait till after Snatch Game to use the chocolate bar make sense? No, not really, but it's kind of the only reason I could possibly think of for why this season was paced this way. You know, it is such an iconic season. It's so good. I love all these queens. And for a long time, I was among the detractors of, oh, this season's too long. Can we start sending these bitches home? Because I was having fun, I didn't mind it. But in hindsight now that we have the double elimination and we're, 14 episodes in and not even at the finale, now I can kind of look back and say, some of this was messy boots. And I'm not sure if this is the exact reasons why, but the fact that there are so many challenges that require a certain amount of queens, these are all of them, and 2 of them needed 8 queens, but with an entire other challenge in between them, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So to me, I think the order of the challenges did switch at some point after Kornbread's disqualification in order to meet the quota and make the season make more sense with what the producers wanted from the twist, from the challenges, from all of that. I'm sure this made no sense. Like, in my head, it makes sense, but I'm starting to realize maybe what I'm saying makes no goddamn sense. It's crazy how one little thing, like Kornbread going home randomly, throws off the whack for an entire season. But I do think it's somewhat because production planned everything too far ahead. This chocolate twist had to happen at a certain point. We have 2 challenges that have 9 queens. Obviously, that's going to mess things up then when you lose someone early. It just feels like they kind of shot themselves in the foot by over-planning too much, and for having so many episodes that required a certain amount of queens to be there. Because think about other challenges that we didn't get this season, like the makeover, like the commercial challenge. Those challenges, it doesn't matter how many queens are there for those. So by losing those challenges and instead having these ones which require certain queens, it just became so complicated, and I can understand why production was like, well, let's just throw anything we can at the wall to make this work. But in the end, it did make for a pretty wonky season where it feels like, oh my gosh, we haven't lost anybody in weeks, and now suddenly we're at top 5. What do you think, though? Do you think that my explanation, 1, makes sense, and if it doesn't, I'm sorry, and 2, is feasible? Because honestly, I couldn't think of any other reason why things were the way that they were and all these weird little moments. So I want to hear your thoughts. Also, I want to hear, who are you rooting for in this top 5? I want to know who you want to win this season. Now, for me, genuinely, I like all of them so much. Like, I love Willow Pill. But then I'm like, oh, but Angie, but Bosco, like, but oh, Daya Betty is so much my style of drag that I love. So I'm very torn. I would honestly be happy with any of them winning, and I'm just hoping for this live finale, which, yes, we are getting a live studio finale a la season 11, season 10, which I'm very, very excited for. I just hope they deliver, and I cannot wait to see what they bring. All right, so yeah, that was me trying to solve the mystery of this mess, and did it work? Probably not. Sorry again if that was confusing, but this whole season was confusing, so I did the absolute best that I could. Here are the links to all of my social medias. Thank you so much to my patrons. And if you're not following along on my Instagram with the Large Ladness winners brackets, we are getting towards the end of that, and go vote for your favorites on my Instagram story every weekday, because these polls are getting closer and closer in percentages as we move on. I think we've had a couple now that were like 48-52 at the end. So I'm excited to see who takes it, and I cannot wait to do more things like this in the future because it seems like you guys really like it. So thank you guys so much for watching. It's been an incredibly, incredibly long day, more like months and months and months, solving the mystery of what happened to season 14. And the answer is ankle went cleek and production went eek. I'm an idiot. I'm so stupid. Okay, I will see you all in the next one.